Hello everyone, welcome to a racing strategy guide for this week's manufacturers race at Spa-Francorchamps. We can do this race tonight on the 30th of November and it's also available again on the 3rd of December. It's to replicate the World Finals Manufacturers Cup final race. They did do 30 laps around Spa, we've just got the 15 laps. We have a qualifying session of 10 minutes with fuel and tyre wear off. We have the fuel at ×2 and tyre wear at ×4 for the race. Racing hard, intermediates and wets are available, but the racing hards are mandatory. That is a very important element for this one. Now my experience of this one is going to be based on when we did the race on the 25th of November. In that case, the warm-up was held up in wet conditions. And then when we kind of transitioned into qualifying, this kind of surprised me at the time, it was absolutely bone dry. So qualifying was in the dry, so obviously the hard tyres for qualifying. But when we go into the race, it is back to a wet track and the race will transition to a dry track at a certain point, usually around about lap 6 or 7. Now I'm going to assume it's going to be exactly the same for today's race and also for the race next week, and the reason I think that is because the hard tyre is mandatory in all of them, so they have to have very similar conditions in order to make that hard tyre usable if it's going to be mandatory, and you'll pick up a 1 minute penalty if you do not use it. So going into the start of the race, you do want to start on intermediates. Now a lot of people got caught out with this initially because qualifying was in the dry, so a lot of drivers did start on the hard tyre or the racing or the slick tyre at the beginning of the race. You can start on the wet tyres. There's not a huge difference between the wets and the intermediates initially, but I would recommend starting on the intermediates. I definitely think it is the best tyre, but whatever you do, make sure you do not start on the hard tyre or you're going to suffer a fate very similar to this McLaren driver here. So you can see they're on the hard tyre. They've got all the assists on possibly to try and help them get through this part of the race. They valiantly get down into La Source before going wide on the AstroTurf. They hit the throttle and yeah, inevitably they are going to spin round. I mean, it did take them a little bit longer than I thought it would, but yeah, this definitely caught people out. It caught people out in the first split that I did. It was still catching people out in the seconds, but I suspect it will catch some people out today and also next week as well. But yeah, start on the intermediate tyres. If you start on a wet tyre, as I said, it's not a disaster. There's still reasonable sort of grip. The sort of grips, not you know, the sort of lap times that you can kind of do on the intermediates and the wet tyres are not hugely different. There's an Atenza just up in front of me that's on the wet tyres, and as you can see they are doing okay, but by lap 6 a drying line will start to form, and if you're exceptionally brave and exceptionally gifted in terms of car control, and I suspect possibly in an MR car probably helps as well, you can pit as early as lap 6. So we've got Max Power in our race here, started on the intermediate tyres, and he's going to come in and pit at the end of lap 6. Now I would suggest that for most people this is at least 1 lap too early, but you know, the Porsche is a good handling car, Max has got very good car control, and yeah, if you're kind of confident in your car control abilities, then and you're looking to maybe try and get the jump and take a risk or try something different, you can pit as early as lap 6. Just be careful as you come out the pit lane, and we'll obviously take a little bit a better look at that a little bit later on. But yeah, obviously be very careful as you come out that pit lane, because obviously you're not on the drying line at that point, and yeah, make sure you are staying well on that dry line as you do your outlap if you pit as early as that. Going back to our race, we're on to lap 7, we're up into 6th place at the moment. Now, 2 drivers in front of us, we've got a Subaru of Lee Boone, and we've got the Atenza here of Berlin Racing, I believe that is. So I'm going to jump forward here to the end of lap 7, and I was considering pitting at the end of this lap, but I decided, you know what, I'll do the opposite of what these two do. So those two go into the pits. Now I'd say this is probably the optimal time to make your pit stop is lap 7, but we decided, you know what, let's try something a little bit different. If I just pit at that time, I'm just going to come out behind them. Let's go an extra lap. The intermediates have still got reasonable grip in the dry weather. We'll pit at the end of lap 8 and we can see if we're just going to have maybe better tyres at the end, or maybe a little bit of clear track to try and work with. Now this is the most important part of the race. As you exit the pits, you have to, you know, be so careful with the throttle. Get onto that drying line as quickly as you can. we spun in the first split. I literally put about 10% throttle in, and we spun as we left the pits. So yeah, the most important part of the race, because all that work you've done in the first part of the race goes out the window if you come out the pit lane and do an instant spin. And as you can see, as we left the pits there was no sign of the Supra and the Atenza. So let's see what happened to these two drivers, because it will kind of demonstrate my point quite nicely. So the Supra's going to come out here behind the Atenza, and yeah, we've now got a parking lot here of a McLaren and a Supra in the wall. If you do this, if you come out the pits and you do this, don't beat yourself up about it. It's such an easy thing to do. But the danger doesn't end there. We see the Atenza on the dry tyres having a little bit of a moment coming up over the hill at Eau Rouge. But yeah, the dry line at this part of the race is pretty thin. You can kind of see it there, the kind of lighter grey. It's quite well kind of displayed, so you can actually see where you've got to place the car. But you really want to be very, very careful on the curbs, because obviously the edge of the track and the curbs have still got some residual water. And you're going to see the Atenza, they just run a foot wide going through Lake Home. That's enough to spin the car round. So once you're on the dry tyres, you're definitely not home and dry, pardon the pun. There's still a lot of dangers to be aware of, and you know, that danger is ever present, because as much as the track dries towards the end of the race and it looks like it's completely dry, the edges still have a little bit of moisture there. And you can see on the last lap here, we just got a little bit too confident on the curb in Pouhon, and we spun the car halfway through the last lap into the wall. Major damage. Obviously that damage disappears after 30 seconds. Now it wasn't too bad, to be perfectly honest with you, for us, because even though this was an all A+ lobby, and this kind of was something that we noticed as well, the field spread is massive. So by the end of the race, you know, there's usually huge gaps between the cars. So we lost about 10 seconds there, but you know, we never lost our third place on the road at the time. However, we were to actually make up a further position. We had been chasing this driver down in the closing stages, and we're catching them dramatically. And as it turned out, they had tried to do the no stop on the intermediate tyres, and I suspected at the time he was going to get a penalty. But just to confirm to you and to make sure you do not try this strategy, they're going to cross the line in second place there. We're going to come into the chicane here in third place. We're just about to cross the start finish line, and you're going to see me get boosted up to second place, and the Swiss driver is going to start dropping down the order. Now I think they finished about 6th place again, because of that field spread being so big towards the end of the race. So yeah, you can't do the no stop on intermediates. But yeah, it's a bit of a raw video, this one. I only had the replay footage from one of the runs that I did to kind of put it together, but hopefully we've got all the points across there about how you want to run this one. So you will be doing qualifying in the dry weather, but the race will start on intermediates or wet weather tyres. So I would recommend intermediate tyres, because as the track dries they will be better than the wet tyres. You can pit as early as lap 6 if you're in probably an MR car only, or if you're incredibly confident in your car control. I would suggest that's maybe at least 1 lap too early for the majority of people. Most people should be pitted on lap 7. We went to lap 8. It didn't really do us too much harm. But the most important part of this race is that pit exit once you go into the hard tyres. Remember, tell yourself, repeat it over and over and over again as you're leaving the pits. Wet track, wet track, wet track. Get the car onto the racing line before you hit the throttle. And yeah, you're not quite home and dry at that point. The track will still have some dangers at the edge, so do be careful to keep the car on the racing line when you're on the hard tyres, and don't get too complacent even on the last lap like we did. And finally, yes, you cannot do a no stop on the intermediates, or you will pick up a 1 minute penalty. But that's pretty much it for this one. Fuel is no issue whatsoever. Tyre wear is not really any issue either. So yeah, it's just a case of surviving this one in the early stages in the wet track, and then surviving that pit stop, and then not getting too complacent towards the end. But if the video's been useful, please hit that like button, please hit that subscribe button. Good luck in this race if you're doing it. I wish you all the best in the wet weather, and yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I shall catch you on the next one. Goodbye now.